Hello everyone, welcome back to the Zekko football channel. Chelsea have ended Manchester City's 11-game winning run by getting a 1-1 draw at the Etihad and naturally putting a dent into Manchester City's title credentials. But what did Chelsea do so well to really hurt the current Premier League champions? Well, today we're taking a look. If you are new to the channel, please make sure that you subscribe, you like the video, and you turn on those notifications. It really would help me out. But now, let's get into it. The game finished 1-1, but I think there were a load of different tactical tweaks that really do need a mention, and especially from Chelsea's point of view, I was really impressed by the way they set up and the way they went about their performance. Man City had a couple of issues and they were sorted out in the second half, and all in all, it was a really, really good game, and I think you would look at the scoreline and think, oh, it was a bit of a dull affair, but it was far from it. We're going to start with the lineups because, as I said, Man City did occur and did have some problems, especially revolving around Julian Alvarez out in this central attacking midfield role, the left attacking mid. He ended up dropping a little bit deeper because of the pressure and the presence of Moises Caicedo. I thought Chelsea did a fantastic job, especially in the first half, of containing Manchester City and making sure that they pushed them out into the wide areas. If you haven't seen my preview for the game, they essentially did what I wanted them to do. They ended up playing in a box formation when they were out of possession, allowing Jackson to come back and partner Conor Gallagher, who went over to the right-hand side a little bit. This gave them a box to defend the centre of the pitch for, pushing Manchester City out into wide areas, forcing them to create crosses and then relying on their two centre-backs in Disasi and Colwill to be able to essentially deal with that pressure. In playing Colwill and Disasi, what they were able to do is push a little bit higher up the pitch. They had the mobility to be able to hold that line a little bit more aggressively, and this squeezed the pitch for Chelsea and prevented Manchester City from really dictating through the middle of the park. And it's really shown in the average positions for both sides. So this is Manchester City. And the first thing I want you to notice is where Julian Alvarez is. He's next to Rodri, who is obviously the main dictator and the central defensive midfielder for this Man City side. But Alvarez ends up dropping a little bit deeper, almost as an extra centre mid, to try and rotate the ball round. This is because they couldn't get through the centre of the pitch. Kevin De Bruyne was shuffling from left to right to try and open up any kind of pocket space. But if you see here, look at this. Kevin De Bruyne can't get on the ball in the middle of the pitch, and this was down to the way that Chelsea played. It was down to Enzo Fernandez, Conor Gallagher and Moises Caicedo. It shuffled them out wide and just prevented them from really getting a foothold through the middle of the pitch. And then we can have a look at Alvarez's positions. He drops a little bit deeper, he becomes a little bit more of a centre mid, and this really stifled Man City to a certain point. And I think Pep Guardiola saw this. He brought Bernardo Silva on in around about the 64th minute, and just look at what happens to Man City's positions. All of a sudden, instead of being another centre mid, he pushes him forwards, and it creates a lot more pressure and a lot more problems for Chelsea. It means that Man City are not only further up the pitch, creating more dangerous positions, but it pulls Caicedo back. Instead of him being the aggressor, he's having to retreat back into a pocket of space because of where Bernardo Silva is picking up the positions in these half spaces and half areas. Now, it still meant that Chelsea needed and pushed Man City out wide, but I thought it was a really interesting tactical tweak from Guardiola, which really helped them to really gain some impotence in the first half. Let's go back and talk about Chelsea, because this is really what I want to focus on. Let's talk about the way that they defended. From minute one, I was really impressed by the way they held their lines and held their shape. They pushed up aggressively, even though later on in the half they dropped a little bit deeper. They pushed up really aggressive in the first half and made sure that they tried to play through Man City, through the high line that they held. But the box formation that I was talking about in the preview, they played it here, and it was brilliantly executed, utilising the defensive capabilities of Jackson when he drops in when they're out of possession, along with Conor Gallagher. It meant that there was no player that could get in between this area because of how aggressive Chelsea were. And then you've got the fullbacks. I thought Gusto and Chilwell were fantastic at being really aggressive in going forwards, utilising their pace to occupy these wide areas, and it meant that Chelsea continuously had a threat. Palmer out on this right-hand side, whenever he picked the ball up, Gusto was on his bike to try and overlap him. This created penetration for Chelsea, and it also meant that Man City had to react. They had to run towards their own box. Sterling went, Jackson went, and it's this penetration that allowed Chelsea to get some impotence and some real drive into the game. And defensively, as I said, I thought they were pretty sensational with their box formation. Let's go and talk about Gusto for a little bit, because he put in one of the performances of the season for me. You can see his heat map right here down this Chelsea right-hand side, and I thought he dealt with Jeremy Doku extremely well. He actually won 9 out of his 13 ground duels, and when you're talking about a player like Doku, he is tricky, obviously. He's able to win 1v1 situations, and I think it's a massive credit to Gusto that the fact that he was able to deal with so many different 1v1 situations. He just did a brilliant job. He had 10 clearances in the game, and when we talk about clearances, one player that we really need to mention is Axel Disasi. Now, I haven't been Disasi's biggest fan, but I thought he needed to come into this game in place of Thiago Silva next to Colwill because of his presence, of his aerial ability. And look here, he made 16 clearances this game. That's the most out of any Chelsea player in this team in this game. He won all of his aerial duels, and it just goes to show that having that presence, having that ability in the air was just vital for the way that Chelsea wanted to play in pushing Man City out to these wide areas. In the end, it does need to be said that Haaland did have a load of chances, but I thought that Chelsea rode their luck, but also deserved their bit of luck. I thought they played very well. Nicholas Jackson in the transition next to Cole Palmer, I thought did a very good job. But what changed? Because that's another thing. Towards the latter stages of the second half, something really changed, and it's what I mentioned a little bit earlier. It's this position with Julian Alvarez. Instead of Alvarez dropping a little bit deeper, instead of him coming for the ball, he played Bernardo Silva and he swapped him out at around about the 64th minute. Pochettino saw this and immediately saw that there was a lot of possession, a lot of domination in these forward areas, and so he reacted. And what Pochettino ended up doing was switching Chelsea to a back three. He brought in Casadei and he brought in Chalobah, and they became a back three here. But what ended up happening is that they lacked the impotence in wide areas to be able to drive forwards, and all of a sudden they naturally just started to sit off. This gave Man City not only more possession and more ability to drive forwards, but it also retracted the threat that Chelsea had on the counter-attack. Now, I don't think it was particularly a wrong thing to do, but it was something that really did impact in the momentum of the game, and it gave Man City a little bit more chance to go forwards. Overall, I thought Chelsea defended unbelievably well and thoroughly deserved to take a point, if not more, away from the current champions. As you can see, a lot of the stats are in favour of Man City, but not shots on target. Chelsea were more clinical, even with their 30% possession, and this just shows that there's a different side to Pochettino. There's a way that he can play in keeping either clean sheets or low-scoring games and not needing to dictate possession. I think it shows a bit of tactical nous from him. And for all the criticism that he's come into in the last season or so, I think he deserves a lot of praise for this, in turning his side into a more defensive, cohesive unit. Chelsea took one of their big chances they had in the game, rather than Man City missing all of them. They missed 3 out of their 3 big chances, and I thought Chelsea thoroughly deserved the point that they got, and they maybe even should have gotten more. A thoroughly brilliant performance from Chelsea, which deserves a lot of credit. Before we end, I just want to show you a couple of in-game images to really highlight what I've been talking about here. So this is earlier on in the game, and I want to show you Chelsea's defensive setup, because it was extremely important in the way they were able to stop Man City going through the centre of the pitch. So Ake currently has the ball here, and first of all, look how much space he is between him and the closest Chelsea player. The second thing I want you to notice is this is Jackson. This is the Chelsea back line. As I said, pushing up really high, as high as they possibly can without giving away too much space. But the space between Jackson and Disasi is minuscule. It's far too close. And that's such a good thing for Chelsea to stop Man City from going through the centre of the pitch. The next thing, the distance between the right winger and the left winger, essentially Chelsea's left side and right side of the pitch, it's again non-existent, which means that Rodri who is currently being occupied by Conor Gallagher. I asked for a man marking system. Now, they didn't essentially do this, but Conor Gallagher did a fantastic job of making sure he was on Rodri as much as possible. Caicedo and Enzo holding up the space. Akanji's gone on a little bit of a walkabout here, and Kevin De Bruyne is off screen currently. But I thought that Chelsea did a fantastic job of just isolating the space inside the middle of the pitch, forcing Man City's passes to go out wide, and then relying on the 1v1 dueling capability of Gusto and the backup of Cole Palmer. That's on the right-hand side, and the same can be said for the left-hand side. I thought Sterling did a very good job defensively, backing up Ben Chilwell when he needed to, but then spinning in behind. But the absolute condensing of the play because of Jackson, because of the Chelsea back four, creating that lack of space in between just meant that Man City couldn't play through the middle, and automatically Chelsea had the upper hand in that scenario. Let's take a look at another image. This is the lead up to one of the chances that Chelsea had. It's not the goal, but I thought they did fantastically well. So Cole Palmer picks up the ball out on the right hand side. Remember what I said about Gusto, immediately seeing that as a trigger to go in beyond. He's going to beat Ake for pace, who is currently stood here. Alvarez, who's playing as more of a centre mid, didn't read the danger quick enough, and it meant that Chelsea again got an advantage situation. And if I just show you this here, this is the current Man City back line. So we know Ake is pushed up. This is the left centre back, this is the right centre back, and here down a little bit is the right back. As you can see, they're stood on the halfway line. Now, this is one of the real pillars of the way Man City play. They like to squeeze the pitch as well, but in a more offensive sense. And when the ball gets turned over, I think this is a really, really dangerous high line. We see Aston Villa do this a lot of the time, but it creates so much space in behind for people willing to be runners in beyond. And that's exactly what Chelsea had here, which is why there was such a threat. Gusto manages to beat his man. Cole Palmer sits Doku down when he tries to combat him, and the ball is on for the right-hand channel. And just look at the pace of both Gusto and Jackson. Jackson's now on his bike because he's seen the fact that Chelsea are on the break. Diaz has now got to cover, and all of a sudden the Man City players are all running towards their own goal. And they haven't beaten the offside. And it just means that it's so much more difficult for them not only to get back, but just look at the pace difference between Jackson and the other Man City players. It should have been a goal. In the end, it's a decent save by Ederson. I thought Jackson did a very poor job of controlling the ball. I mean, look at this. It should have been a goal. But it just shows an example of how dangerous Chelsea were in this game. Let's go and have a look at the goal itself. So the ball gets played up to Jackson. And as you can see, Man City have smelt this already. They're ready to pounce on him. They're ready to go. They're aggressive. They want to win the ball back higher up the pitch. That's what Pep Guardiola wants. Jackson does a neat little flick, and then you've got them going. Cole Palmer plays a great run from the flick from Jackson, and they can go. Jackson spins. Cole Palmer plays the pass, and again, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Man City players now running towards their own goal, essentially. And if we have a look at Kyle Walker here, this is the halfway line. So no Man City player is actually beyond the halfway line in their own half. This means it's that little bit more dangerous for them when the ball gets turned over. They're all 6s and 7s. Ruben Diaz is currently confronting. Akanji is nowhere to be seen. Kyle Walker is the only one that can try to make up the ground, but in the end, it just isn't good enough. Raheem Sterling is here, and he actually beats Kyle Walker for pace in a really good foot race, and it's just really well orchestrated by Chelsea. I thought they occupied the space very, very well. Sterling managed to come back inside on his right foot and slot it home. It was a brilliantly well-worked goal, full of quality, full of finesse, and it was available because Chelsea had the bravery not only to play through the lines, but also the ability to occupy and exploit the space that Manchester City gave them. It's a brilliant, brilliant game for Pochettino and Chelsea, and it really does seem to be a real opening, some green shoots there for Chelsea. And who knows, Pochettino might be onto something after all. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.